We started.
Are we started?
Yeah, it started.
Oh, God.
That's okay.
Hello there. It's Sally McNally, the Irish midwife,
And this is Bridget, her daughter.
and you're about to hear some of the bleeding truth.
So why did you want to start this podcast, Mom?
Well, the truth is that I've been in nursing for 40 years, and most of that time has been in women's health, especially in the labour room. And as a matter of fact, I've spent so much time in labour rooms that it feels like a natural habitat to me. So, of course, I've witnessed many wonderful things, but also some things that disturb me and just don't sit right in my heart. I want to bring a bit of a spotlight on women's health around the world. And I want to tell you about some things where I've seen that women have not been treated well, where in actual fact I would say they've been abused in labour rooms. And then and in other places they definitely could be treated better. So I think the more we talk about stuff, the more women can realise when they're being treated wrong, or they can realise what their options are, that they have a voice, that they can speak up and they can say what they want, what they don't want. And they can, tell us, how they would like to be treated. And I think that we're getting there, but I think we have a long way to go.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is really cool. You can probably help open up a lot of eyes with, you've been around the world to lots of different labor rooms, not just in the US. So there's different perspectives of everything that we can all learn about through this. So I'm also interested. How did you even get into nursing in the first place?
Well, when I was about 17, I was working for the government at home in Ireland. It was like a civil service job, just like an office job. And my father applied for nursing for me. He put the application in, and I didn't even know he had. And it arrived back in the mail saying that I had been accepted for an interview. And I had an older sister who was a nurse. And so I felt like, oh, that's okay. That sounds like a good idea.
Wow.
And my dad later, he told me, he said that he'd seen me working with my grandfather who'd had diabetes and he had had both his legs amputated.
Wow.
Yeah, so I kind of helped him, nursed him a little bit at home with the rest of the family. And I helped him walk again, like on prosthetic limbs and
Wow.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
that's your grandfather.
Yeah, and that was like my first kind of experience
Wow.
nursing.
That's my great grandfather. I didn't
That's
even
your
know that.
great grandfather,
Wow.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was wrong with him that he
Diabetes.
had diabetes? Okay.
Yeah, and then of course he got really bad neuropathy and then gangrene.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so your dad saw how nurturing you were and was
Yes.
like, she's gonna be a fantastic nurse.
That's what he
Not gonna run it
yeah.
by you at all. Just gonna throw you out there.
That's kind of what he said to me. He was
Wow.
like, "You should be a nurse like your sister Mary."
Mm-hmm. What? And you were like, I guess you'll give it a shot.
Yeah, yeah. And I never looked back. Loved it from the get-go. It's just the best job ever.
So 40 years ago, the education's probably a lot different from what we're used to here in
Oh
the
my
States.
gosh.
So you're 17.
Yes.
What is that like? How are you thrown into medical
Well,
school or education?
we kind of ran the hospital as the students. We were the nurses. We'd have, seasoned nurses there and clinical educators with us, but we were the worker bees. Like we were the ones being like the nurse aides here in America.
Wow.
Yeah, and the LVNs, that we would take that role, doing all the bathing and helping and changing dressings and all of that.
So what kind of area of medical field like were you helping with the most?
Every part we had to spend time on each floor: medical nursing, surgical nursing, psychiatric,
Wow.
maternity. in neonatal intensive care, in the emergency room, the operating room. So we
At
got,
17, you're in
well, it
there.
took me like three years to do the whole training.
Wow.
Yeah, so we'd spend a wee bit of time in the classroom, but most of it was like clinical, on the job. This is how to take a suture out, and
Wow.
yeah, it was great. But it was run by nuns. It was run by the medical
Oh, yikes.
missionaries of Mary, and they were so cool. Most of these nuns, now nuns, let me tell you, when I meet a nun in the street, the hairs on the back of my head kind of stand up a wee bit, and I hold my breath until I get past
It's
because I've
true. Every
met.
time you see one, she grabs
It's
my
true.
hand and she's like, it's a nun.
Isn't it true? Yeah, because I have met some nuns that, well, they are scary. Some of them are scary, and if there's a nun listening to this, some of you are scary. You are, but on the other hand, some of you are just the best people. Like these women, the medical missionaries of Mary, they'd all been to Africa on missionary work and,
Wow.
and working as nurses over there, in really hard conditions years ago. They went into the battlefield of nursing, like I had one aunt who was one of those nuns, and she told me how she'd work with people who had leprosy and just constantly bandaging and cleaning and trying to help them, and like just pure walking saints. But these nuns were tough, hard teachers as well. They wanted us to get it right. They'd see you coming down the corridor and they'd stop you and they'd say, "What are the functions of the gallbladder?" And you'd be like trying to figure out what and try to roll them off. And if you didn't know them, they'd come back and ask you the next day.
Wow.
Yeah, they were tough. But they were great, and they kind of in their minds were getting us all ready for maybe missionary work in the hopes that some of us would follow in their footsteps and go and work, in places that needed, that kind of.
So did they inspire you to do traveling and
Oh,
work in other places?
yes, they did. They inspired me so much that after my nursing, I did midwifery, and it was like the same group of nurses or the same group of nuns that were training me to be a midwife. And at the end of my training, the famine hit Ethiopia. And it was like a huge deal. Thousands of people were starving and
Wow.
having such a really hard time. And I felt this big surge coming in me to like go and help. I thought, here I am. I'm a nurse now. I'm a midwife. I can go and I can save the world over there in Ethiopia. And so I ran to the head nurse and I said, I want to go. I want to go. I want to be, one of the people that goes to help over there. And she said, well, there's only one visa for the group. And there was 20 in
Oh,
our
wow.
group. And one visa came for one of us to go to help in Ethiopia. And wouldn't you know it, there was one in our group who was a nun, and she was in the medical missionaries, and a sweetheart she was, but she got the visa. And I was so mad, I was like fuming hot, and I was so mad that I went to the bishop, and he said, how is your faith in God? I remember him well to asking me, how is your faith in God? And I was mad. I said, what's that got to do with it? I want to go and help. And I really feel like, we all should have had a chance. It shouldn't have just been given to one person. And he said, you go out of this country and you go to these strange countries, you don't know what you're going to meet. They have different religions, they have voodoo, they have all sorts of different stuff.
Voodoo.
Yeah, he even
That's what
mentioned
he's
that.
concerned of.
And he said, what if you lose your religion? And I didn't want to tell him at the time, but I didn't really have a religion at the time. Of course, I'm raised Catholic, and all through my schooling and then my nursing, it was all Catholic stuff, but I didn't really lean in that direction. But I couldn't tell him that it was a lost cause anyway. But so anyway, she got the visa and off she went to Ethiopia. And I got the bug at that stage, and I went in a different direction when I was able to go. But um, I did meet her a year later when I came home, and the poor girl had come back totally depressed and kind of in like like almost like in a state of like deep depression.
Wow.
And somebody else told me what she had seen. The poor girl, she had gone over it thinking she was going to be a nurse and a midwife, delivering babies and helping moms to get their babies breastfeeding and all of this great stuff that we had learned. But they brought her out to a valley and they stood her at the edge of the valley and they said, look down in there. And the valley was full of people, thousands and thousands of people who'd come to this area in the hopes of getting food so that they could live.
Whoa.
And her job was to walk through and to find the people who would live if they were fed.
Whoa.
So,
Wow.
yeah, I don't know how my mental health would have done with that job, you know.
Wow,
So,
that is wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, if she ever found her joy again. But
That's something else.
Mm-hmm.
Never
Sorry,
heard that
that
again.
story was a bit long.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to keep going on and on.
I was getting all into it. It's wonderful.
Were you?
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask, let's preface back to the nuns. What is it about nuns also? I mean, I've heard probably more about this than other things.
Yeah.
But tell us a little more about your experience with nuns. I know you had some with in the schools and such.
Yes. Well, we'd go to school and we'd have to sit, you know, very neat in little uniforms, little red plaid skirts and green jumpers and little blazers.
Skirts in Ireland, cold
Yes,
Ireland, no
that's
matter
right.
the weather, right?
The knees
Yeah.
would be red, frozen
Oh
on the
gosh.
way to school. Your little socks and shoes. Oh my gosh. Anyway, we'd get there and the nuns would be very, very strict. And if you weren't paying attention or if you were doodling or messing around, they were violent. Yeah, some of them were violent and they would slap your knuckles with a big hard ruler. And I got sent quite a lot to the headmistress. If you were messing and tickling someone or they were pinching you or something, but it wasn't like you were being really bad. You weren't being bad, but you were distracting someone. And I was a bit bold like that, I guess. But she'd say, "Go to the headmistress," and I remember going in, and she wouldn't ask what you had done wrong. It was the fact that you were there coming meant you were coming for punishment. So she would say, "Hold out your hand," real cross.
Doesn't care what for.
And you'd hold out your hand, and she'd come with a big 3 yard long ruler, or it was a yard long, so that'd be 3 feet long, right?
Yeah.
And she'd hold it up over her head and whap, slap your hand, whap, and your hand would immediately go on fire, burning hot and painful. Oh my gosh! And usually that was it, and off you go back to the classroom. Well, one day I was stopped in the corridor, and this nun said to me, "Bring this to the headmistress," and it was a note. And I said, "Okay," and I ran to her office, and I came in, and she said to me, "Put out your hand," and I was like, "But." I wanted to say, "I have this for you," and she said, "Hold out your hand," and I held out my hand, and whap! I got another big slap.
Oh my god.
And she said, "Off with you." And I said, "But I have to give you this." And she looked at me and she just said, "Oh," and just took it off me. And I felt like saying, now, do I get a freebie or something? Like, can I just have like...
Oh, it's so mean.
Yeah, it was so mean. And your hand, honestly, when you look at it, the mark of the ruler and everything. And that was like normal in the beginning, you know. But by the time I went to like high school, we call it secondary school, that had kind of faded away a bit because some people started saying, no, this is not right. You can't do this to the children. But the poor boys, they used to have a harder time, I remember.
The
The
priests.
priests were, the Christian brothers. We sometimes would meet some of our friends, a couple of boys, on the way home from school. And I can remember a few times seeing like big bruises on them, or their lips would be bloodied and swollen.
Wow.
I did see that. And the other boys would say, don't ask him, don't ask him. And it usually meant that he'd been beaten by the Christian brother.
That's
And
wild.
we knew that. And I did see that a few times,
So
yeah.
glad I was in that
I'm
generation.
so glad. Would have fought for you,
I was a
Bridget.
messer in class too,
I would
so
have stood up for you.
I would have gotten in a lot of trouble.
Oh, God, I would have gone in there. I would have. Yeah, you couldn't have. Mm-mm. It was mean. It was cruel. Yeah, we were afraid. I was terrified. And that's not a good learning, is
No,
it?
it's not a good learning
No,
environment at all.
no.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm so glad to start doing this and learn more because I'm learning things I didn't
Really?
know before about you. So I think this is gonna be really fun.
I have one more nun story
Yeah,
from
let's do
school.
it. Let's do it.
Well, my sisters, I had 5 older sisters, and they'd give me all their old clothes, which was great. I was never short of good clothes, good outfit you could put. And I had twin sisters who came just before me, so sometimes I could like mix and match and have. If I liked an outfit, I'd have two of that, right? But anyway, one of my
From the
older
twins.
sisters. One of my older sisters gave me a pair of boots, or she let me borrow them, and had a little bit of a high heel, nothing like 6 inch or anything, but a little bit of a high heel. But they came up to the knees, like maybe even a little bit above the knees, so they were like kind of like interesting looking. And I
Yeah.
was probably like 13, 14, and I was stomping around. And of course, I was used to like hanging out with my older sisters, so I might have given off an air of, more maturity. Even though I was in a class, that they were like a year or two ahead of me. But anyway, that's for another story. But these nuns stopped me in the middle of the corridor and said, "And where do you think you're going with your long black boots?" And I thought I was lovely in them. And she made me take them off because they weren't the uniform, didn't have the regular
Wow.
brown shoes. And she made me walk around in my bare feet. And then I could,
Wow.
yes, yeah. Well, in my
What
stockings.
was the weather?
Cold.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah,
That's
it
mean.
was mean. But I kind of figured why she didn't want me in them, because on my way home in them, I remember these fellas whistling out the window of the car. So I must have looked kind of sexy or something.
They look too good for school.
Maybe I turned her on.
Oh my god. Okay.
Okay, let's not go.
It's okay. All right.
Sorry, Sister Mary, Mother Martin. Oh,
Mother Martin. I don't know. Anyways. Alrighty, thank you guys for listening. If you are interested in hearing more of Sally's crazy stories, please like and subscribe so you can find us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or through the links in the description below.
come on back for more of the bleeding truth soon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a million.
Thanks a million.